Deba Zish Keta, Denege, Nawi Tony, and give Shawati to Kuguri Essence. Genege, Dean, Jika Rangi, Danu Lenche, and Shengi, or the teacher, said, let me do more, so some Rangi Danu Lenche, Yamnache, Essence. Shandagi Kuno, Yamnache, or Essence, Timajena, Majedena, that Yagi Rumara, Chesandima, Mishandagi, Motiva, Susuranga, Danu Lenche. And that was so long to Duchin, Nimnache, Essence. That didn't get out in the issue at all.
Good evening. It's been a little while, perhaps a month, since we were together for Bodhisattva's Way of Life. Where we concluded a month ago was finishing with of the three types of ethical restraint. We've long since finished ethics of refraining from misdeeds. We concluded looking at the ethically accumulating virtuous qualities, the second of the two. So this, in the verses we looked at last time, we saw there the need to come to know the practices very well, by relying on vigilance and mindfulness, to keep the practices present in one's mind, as well as utilizing antidotes when required. And as we concluded with, being well trained, you do not require to be told by others, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do, and this is how you need to do it. But this is something you will have already been trained in and learned well and become skilled in. That's where we concluded last time.
Bangbiden Jigme Assembly somebody that Nijetum Surum Sigurati, Nijetum Surums, then drink Lunga Yisumida, Nijet Chatham Jigme Assembly, Nevi Jawadi Jigme Assembly, some did that, Nijetum Surums or Tordinada, other.
The Bodhisattvas have three types of ethics. The first type is the ethics of refraining from misdeeds. And this refers to refraining from misdeeds of one's body, speech, and mind. And so, for example, not killing, not lying, and so forth. So this is the first type of ethics of a bodhisattva.
Now, the name Kewachi Yusudum Givi Jawa, Chiso Parjin to Yamnajimba, Rangi Kula, Nima Makibatki, Sadu Keva Jagga Tabla Kewa together. Nikia Suzuki Kula Kewaji, the Kishiyomo Pony Pondu, Peg in Yamnachia Delta. Kewachi Kitchumsa, Kewachi give church has a running cooler, Kevacha, to do share. That Chasa Makibat, I get you. Yet, Yaman Rangular, Kevi, Yamlin, Yedu, but he says a more computer diag, the nigger Kewa Jawa to the Kewachi Sutum Sura, that Sutum said the Sumborem, and that did a Kewachi Sum that did. Then Yamlin Jena did that, but Chigit Mambo Murachim, Yamlet Sutum Yamlet Seva Yamachada. And the meet about Combata, Dame about Comalasona, so in Gurua, Chinatanda, Kewachi, Surum said a candidacy of Gurelana, gave each Timber Jimbalo so bigeta, Jimbado Sinu, Junior Sunday Shell and Yamna Karine, Sojugula, Mike Yemena, a Kiavache, by Yamnache, but Jimbe Yamnache, etiquette, Jimbe Yamnache, to Yamnache. And then are in Yamnan Jedi by Kivaki, the Kid, but the Yayane and the Cheju more computer diet, and it's that. So the
second type of ethics, and which is in the section of verses we're just concluding, is the ethically accumulating virtuous qualities, or you'll often see this translated literally as virtuous dharmas. So this refers to the bodhisattva accumulating virtuous qualities within her own continuum. So these qualities one can divide into two general sections. Those excellent qualities that are yet to be developed, so those are being newly cultivated. And then the second part, or the second type, will be those which have already been accumulated but now are strengthened and grow even further. So there are a vast number of qualities, of virtuous qualities that a bodhisattva cultivates. These will be ethics, generosity, impermanence, and so forth. All the various qualities, mental qualities that a bodhisattva cultivates are included here in this second division, ethically accumulating virtuous qualities.
Ana dirim din ma shue dine dismur dat jimbe paru chinla so gwane kedo gwane gongdo ke shukche choyu chirni chemi dong suichir shenyu duasam hos.
Now turning to the 83rd verse in the 5th chapter, the perfections beginning with generosity are practiced in a sequence of progressive elevation. The greater should not be discarded for the lesser, but the most important consideration is the good of others.
진라 소 진비 파르 진라 소 관계 공도 계주 제세도 당한데 다 진비 80년에 주제이 80년에 세계 80년에 전류 80년에 3대 80년에 시력이 80년에 진라 소 바시 디년에 82년에 주치월 디 관계 공도 개발 파바레서 제나다 진비 80년에 델에 주링이 82년에 개발도 파바 초도 개발해서 주링이 바로 드시면 냠는 텔에 수배 80년대 네 개발 봐봐. 수배 80년대 전류 80년대 개발 봐봐. 전류 80년대 3대 80년대 개발 봐봐. 되네. 얘네 실력이 80년대 개발 봐봐. 그래서 82년대 렘버스는 어진비 냠는데 가마가마되게 어마어마하게 한 쇼도 교발에 개발 봐봐. 그래서
So the perfections, look in the first line, the perfections beginning with generosity. This therefore refers to all 6 perfections, beginning with generosity, followed by ethics, followed by patience, followed by enthusiastic perseverance, followed by concentration, and followed by wisdom. So there is this specific sequence, and this we see in the second line, are practiced in a sequence of progressive elevation. So they are progressively given greater priority or greater elevation, one above the other, in the same sequence that we often hear them. So, for example, Bodhisattvas on the paths of accumulation and preparation, they practice all 6 perfections, but amongst all 6, they focus primarily on the perfection of generosity. And from the first ground, then the Bodhisattva focuses on ethics and so forth. So there, as the Bodhisattva progresses through the various Bodhisattva grounds from the parts of seeing and meditation, there they focus on the subsequent perfections.
전시스마 소람바던 줄람발레 체벌 바시라기 체벌 바베 냠는 체벌 바바 도사리 에자디니 에자다 인에기 파비기 고방 토요데 데네 진베 냠는 데리아 진베 냠는 진바 다야 카카데 체베나 인에기 한데 진베 다야게 체리아 남가 줄라 왕안예 바시와 남가 줄라 안예 바 직비지다다 당이 제지게 남가 줄라 안예 바시와 직비지다다 남가 줄라 안예 바라 줄라 내가도 잘라시오래 남가 알아서 남가 디캐시무 슈르와 제가 되는 남가 죄나 남가 강화나 죄 요래서다 심박하랬다면 다야 요래서 안들에 다야 레비오마 하실다 처럼 저럼 내가 수되네게 하실 땅었으나 다야 매바를 용거로 저는 전세 봐 파와도 요되네 임변냠는 체라부 체바도 파바래 제가 남가 죄나 많이 봐 나시 제가 되네자 진비게 가리스타빈나 토스가요 말해서 진변냠 아치안리에 진변나 다야라.
When the Bodhisattva attains the Arya grounds from the path of seeing, the various trainings they engage in are vastly enhanced because they have come to realize emptiness directly. To take generosity, for example, and there's a specific Dharma term which I don't know, but it comes down to the meaning is like a sky treasury of offerings. And it's the sky treasury of offerings which contains that all that that could be required, the Bodhisattva can draw upon this and utilize for making offerings.
아제 남가 죄라데 직다 파텔 짐바타엘레 근데 귤이야 벤주로 귤이야 강아요 말해서 가리나라고 그래서 두 코르스는 싸싸싸 짐베냐면 두바인데 첼라 참아서 되니기 짐바타야야 강아가요 말해서 가리나라고 벤주 춤브레서 지 월치과 제스마신 디로래.
This sky treasure that the Arya Bodhisattva has access to is due to their incredible merit. So what it means is there's no impediment in terms of their capacity to be able to make offerings of what is precisely required because of this huge store of merit. So it's like someone who's insanely rich in our world. They can purchase whatever they want. There's no need for them to give any consideration to the cost. So the Bodhisattva, because of their strength of merit, they are able to access anything for offerings.
아디네 인자 야 만지 삼로 가르고 그러시네. 아저 셈바 파비 가서들이야 아니 직바 짐바타야리 시션테르 젤이야 다 가르트나나 예요로다 예요로와 가마스카요 마로와 되네 셰심제 담제라 잠다니지는 예요바로다 가실제야 되바 가실제야 되바 메바기네 요마로와 심제 담제라 예링 요마로와 심제 담제라 동아대 잠이지 세원은 예요로와 되네 요바에서 다네 되니게 심제라 예링 가야 메디게 심제라 잠바다 세원이지 첨보대 된되게 되니게 가르나나야 되니게 제직 pen tenisiyo bayina an zamle ne mikyo wala was kemin was orta de karsne to de control gen tigir wa ne de mikyo wala samar was ne samgru wa de ga de control je gi ne de zewa ne yore an zewa ni chenbo de yore semjen ne nyere ne yo mare de ge ne de ne ge je gi jala yona an semjen ba je ne mikyo wo de ge chasa an pen je opposition tigir wa sam big but if you
think about this, for a moment, then some doubts should come to mind, because so he's saying here that Arya Bodhisattvas have such merit that they can have access to anything to make offerings to others, to both ease their suffering, to be of benefit to them, and so forth. There is no limit in terms of what the Bodhisattva can access because of their huge stores of merit. Moreover, this is an Arya Bodhisattva. This being almost certainly as being a Bodhisattva for a great length of time, has incredibly powerful love and compassion, and has completely long since abandoned any partiality. They have no bias, a closeness towards some and a distance towards others, nothing like that. So if you have someone with such compassion and love, as well as such access to resources, then why are there still beings impoverished in the world? Why are beings still struggling and having a hard time when bodhisattvas should be able to reach out and help them?
젤이야 안에 강아 균에 요말 토범에 받쳐 해대 이내야 만절이야 미교들이 말하지 소식이 롱어지에게 소남사고 거래 소소를 쓰는 맨날 해요 말에 배나가 지금이니 사강이야 자지 직사베네 안에 이니마 진두가를 자 bên giáo dục và xin giáo dục đặc biệt này mình giáo dục của rồi xin làm sao giáo dục liên tục rồi giáo của mấy bên liên rồi xin cái gì này liên tục cái này họ sẽ rồi bây giờ giáo dục đặc biệt này áo lông mình anh ấy chỉ giáo con thủ mà đấy tiền thủ mà đấy tin là gì他们说让个是老觉个是那么在这上面呢那的那个解决呢那去考那样个好不然给我们然后给我们等到的嘞
So on the one hand, there is an Arya Bodhisattva with that vast store of merit and access to anything required that can ease the suffering of others, bring benefit to others. Moreover, they are motivated by incredible love and compassion without any kind of bias or partiality towards others. So what is it then that prevents the Bodhisattva from having a transformative impact on everyone, And what prevents the Bodhisattva from interacting and being of benefit to with others is the merit on the side of beings. So where the merit is there, Bodhisattvas can interact. Where the merit is lacking, the Bodhisattvas can reach out, but no one will reach back, taking their hand. So the illustration given is if you have a hook, for that hook to be able to draw something near, that something requires a ring that the hook can enter into and thereby pull it near. But if there's only a hook and there's nothing to hook into, then the Bodhisattva cannot bring themselves close to the sentient being to interact with them. So this is an analogy. What it comes down to, though, is that the interdependency needs to be developed. From the Bodhisattva side, they've developed extensive courses. But from the sentient being side, that's all too often where there is lacking.
Raba ine sosugi beje tangye sonam gubudo. Chisa kashi penjo raba ine sosu beje tangmado sosu beje tangye marashi ha shanda mi shanda ge toto bada la bada. Anishin chik du shine ya chik dosi beje gine mada je sena su shaja che andu shine sosugi dine kasam ji meba chado dine chego ko chisa dine za ko raya ge sonam go wara dine raya ge. Dine raya ji sonam yona yin chik cheya de da ra ru da go ba. Rabbi so you launch a sonum sa, what I launch a sonum sa minute, then the rabbi in a bishat out to go money.
So, for example, when we see whether if one gains wealth, for example, there's clear some past karma, that past merit one has accumulated, has now ripened, and now one has gained wealth. But the outcome of this newly acquired wealth, the outcome of this acquired wealth, this is far from certain. Other causes need to ripen in terms that will dictate how well that wealth, or in what way that wealth is utilized. One may squander it. One may squirrel it away, being miserly, not using it at all. Or one may use it in ways that are really beneficial. So whichever result follows from the acquisition of wealth, this has its own set of causes separate from those that led to the acquiring of the wealth.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know that one year with the Chimba that Chimbe Yamlin, the children Yamlin, the Yak, Oma, the Kama, the Cheba, the Papa, the 1 year going to Kishu, Cheba Papa. I Kishu, Jay, love you down the Chinese Sambanam Yi, Chinese Samban Yamlet to do, Chimbe Parson Yamlet, the Duke, Oma, Cheba of the 2 year person in Yamlin. Tobiagu Danda Besuchin, Yamlechi, or a deep Omokuma Koyanda, to see Yamlechi, or yes, or was. Can you send by the Yamlin 9, the Chimmy Passion Yamlin 9, the Deacon, the other 2 person, the Cabat Papa, Dilo Unit Yaga, Tobiagu, the Besuchin, Yamlin Nango, or Chedaj, Chimmy Passion Yamlin 9, in it, teach Dilla Papa, 2 year person, Yamlin, at Tobiachu, Cabat Papa, Tuition, Lucian, and Yamlin Nango, as Keshu Chase, Oma Cabat Papa did, Tobiagu, Danda, Yana, Yadu, Yamlin Nangores. I didn't Sosugi, a chapel to add the Sosugi Chimbe Yamnia, Yane and the Yamnichi more 1 year going to pay a chapel part, Keshu Cheers, Cheers, and Gasol, other Yamlin Jeva to cook what chair. Yamnichi. Chesade, the Niki Chimbe and Parson Yamlin Yamni that the Goma 3 person Yamne, chapel papa to Toby children Yamnichi. Then it did come out to send Yamnichi or as a Keshu Cheers, at his own.
Looking specifically then at the second line, are practiced in a sequence of progressive elevation. So as mentioned earlier, the 6 perfections are presented in a specific sequence, and one progressively trains in starting with those of lesser priority to those of greater priority. But that being said, it's not just a sequence where you do this one and then you do that one. But whilst one is training in whichever, let's say, the first, that of generosity itself is growing in strength within oneself. So this is growing and flourishing. And then the time will come when one is sufficiently ready to have one's focus moving on to ethics. So what should be understood is one practices all 6. One's focus will be on one of them, and that one will be growing and flourishing in particular, as well as the others. And in time, one will move on to focusing on a second and then the third.
그래서 다 이게 제 천지천만 남기다 이게 인도 관계 표현 실험이 어두스냐면 거래에서 다 이내에서 다 딩하로들이야 자바이나 제사다 계유체에서 다 제니게 소식이 다 진배념의 땅에 진배념의 제다 디그레디 선배 디즘기 참 마침 바제 되네 공부도 수련념의 제다야 개와디 념의 관계 표현이라 념의 제고래서래 등이 진배념의 지기다 개와디 제베다 지기에서 삼다저로 와다 that mambo chemba dine tigre sembe samdane nga zogi ji de jo din chi gyo ma de la ta ma zogi chimbe nyam ne chewe na ta mo pone ko du phe che do ya ne ya do chimbe nyam ne che wo res and that di ma ze and di le ko ma tu du nyam ne ti to ye to la be zu chen nyam ne che wo res che za da nyam ne chi che da di digre sam je che be na ta sem chu ya chi ko mo ko be de to tu ma ro che za de ne chi gyo ma di chok she ma che ba che 기회님은 제발로 초시지야 말이라네. 디면 비당은 상승다 디네도 초시지 오래. 대충 초시고 우리 세월에 내가 지나치다 내가다 디네기 변조도 비야라 대충 초시고 우리 해세래. 제사다 되바 침보에는 배 내가 먹고 차는데 이게 관여다 먹으리 해제. 기회님은 제발로 대충 초시지요 말이라. 다 최대거ችን 마데네 시기 선비 다 디기리 선비 어디 삼다겨 말제다 대충 기회님은 제발로 같이 마슈 배제 체제 파이 뭐 공부도 모베 공부도 도발이야 냠네 제고를 했어야 돼. 당하줄 센데 디스고다 제세. 이내 안에야도 냠네 제고 공부도 했던 달이야. 대충 초시에 맞게 기회 냠네 좀 위에 공부도 수수기 팀이 냠네 제고나 가래 기회 주베다 디 안에 양도 제고 삼다딘 뭐 공부도 도발을 했어.
Specifically then for ourselves, do not bring in an excellent teaching from elsewhere here in error. Elsewhere, one hears about the need to develop a mind of contentment. With a mind of contentment as a basis, one can focus well on the Dharma, not being distracted by unnecessary delights of this world. So there one is encouraged to develop as a contentment with what one has, so that one can focus on the Dharma. In this context, one should not develop a mind of contentment. One should not be content with one's virtuous qualities. In that, one should not think, oh, I'm quite a generous person. I don't need to focus on that. I've got great imprint, good enough. I'm going to focus on something else. This is an error. This would be an error. For ourselves, we need to cultivate all these good qualities, and we're still a long way from being like the Bodhisattvas, let alone the Arya Bodhisattvas. So wherever we can, in whatever way we can, we should give of ourselves, practice generosity, and do so continuously, repeatedly over a sustained period, not ever sitting back on our laurels and thinking, yeah, I'm a generous person, I've done this well, or I'm an ethical person, I don't need to be focusing on that, I should be focusing on something else. Not the case at all. What one would be doing in such a case is by being easily satisfied with oneself, one deceives oneself. So in terms of virtuous qualities, one shouldn't rest on one's laurels or be content, but one should be striving to strengthen our habituation. In particular, when things are relatively easy for us, then we should develop these qualities well, so that in times that are more challenging, we have developed deep habituation.
주의치니 칠니 체미 동세데 다 개와 춘쇼기 주의게 된다라 개와 첨부디 봐 뢰다교 말에서 다교 말에서 주의치니 체미 동세데.
Third line, the greater should not be discarded for the lesser. So those of greater priority should not be discarded for the sake of those of lesser priority.
다디 슈라 가르송어스네 개와 첨부지 주의게 된다라 개와 춘쇼도 뢰다나 티리에서 당 동나 티리에서 개와 첨부디 주의게 된다라 개와 춘쇼도 뢰다나 티리에서.
So the meaning would be, for example, where one has opportunity to engage in a greatly meritorious act, but that means that a more minor meritorious act, this one does not then have the time to engage in, then that would be okay. One should embrace this far greater opportunity to be of benefit, even though it means putting aside a smaller opportunity to be of benefit.
예, 당제 지라 지거로 한들 지템비게 야가비네 지게 협상 총식 돈달래야 협상 딜이 망아 조선당 말와 제자리 만당 말와 제자다 협상 첨부시라고 했는데 딜이야 조선 딜이 거라가 좀 당거와 제자다 협상 첨부가 돈달라 우리 베네 망고시라고 했는데 디 돈달라 디라야 돈달라 조선 como tonraje ta yung ruwata ta como jata maraya ki dondalia como tonraje to sondeng marwati han chidi me chawale ruwa dinani chiwal chago ruwata.
Once again, this is a way of thinking that is in accordance with society. When one is putting one's investing money, one would do so in a way that you can get a good return on one's investment. So this is very similar. In our world, we need to prioritize where we put our time, where we put our energy. And if there is something that is going to be of greater benefit, that's where we should put our time and our energy, because they are limited.
Benangin dadi Tibetan jita zurim soyagi ni dusichile domyod bena da jiksuna jikjena jik chagil jetugo omar jikjena jik jetugo omar 제가 디 domdu da kan jegorelane 제자데 채워지 된다라 충화들을 당고래서 그래. 다 충화이 된다 를 당고래서. 다 된다라는 별로 샤베나 뒤로 천일로 선 별에 안쪽에 주의시에디 송보라 주의시에 술송여로와 주의시에 송여디 안에 술송여로와 제자들 송보라. 나딘마 미션다 지기 샘제 소초에게 된다라 야딜리어도 다디 소교에게 된다라 다 장부시 ben semjeji den ma ko miji soyage den le ben miji soyage den dala mi shanda ji ge den le ben na当然这个咱们练的的那这的嘛着他通上了说通了吧当然这个 Geshe Thubten 呢 midi den ma着上也是在的 Geshe Thubten 呢那说是给的老板呢着上老板呢但我掌握了着上是通了吧的个着上是我呢老板呢掌握些吧呢过这些大家可以收过来要说去过来대다디 소소죠. 다디고 소교고고로 소교와라 가르쳐서는 이 토마소스 주의시오다. 제가 디니디 디주의시에 대당 디다 안다 디니 직담 담가지고로다. 담가지고자 네 가르게치도 세네. 대디피니 소손 소교야디 소교는 미지비침바. 대디 주의시에 소야디 네 추림나의 준송배 추림샷으로와 제다 디니기 미지비 진바 대당 소수게 간 준시비기 스름 소야 니보디 니가 도묘도 디니데 다 직전에 직라르고 직전에 쇼르고로 다 가르 담고래 담나 다 토마스선 준시에레스 대체다디 가르슨 피니 심전 소교에디 기시레스 대사다 계체완다 가르슨의 심전 소교에디 개와체레스 제자다 준시에디 개와 충화체고 디니자 체위된도 충화디 베니 충주된다 철동biểu 말하시되 소수게가 주등 송구가 되시게 송구에 선배 좀전에 대조선 나베는 내심저 쓰고라 제소 제비게 소지 미지비 침바 제투고 말지자 침버들려고 어디네 마지막에 나라다 호마송선의 라벤 준시베는 진춘주시베 디시베네 디심체 소주바 송구를 교고를 제자 체위 된다를 중앙에 당의 디그리에서 더소트 예선
Continuing to look at the third line. Ideally, one should be skilled in practicing the six perfections in harmony. One shouldn't be finding them in contradiction. That being said, there are times one needs to make a decision. There, one needs to utilize one's intelligence. So I've already mentioned one illustration where if you've got, so specifically the third line, the greater should not be discarded for the lesser. If one has an opportunity to engage in a greatly meritorious act, but it means not being able to, or to having to decline an opportunity to do something smaller, then one should do so. One should do the greater deed. But there is also situations where, let's say, generosity and ethics, where these two are in contradiction. And here, sometimes one may even need to choose the lesser ahead of the greater, with generosity being the first, so it's the lesser, and the greater, that being of ethics. So, for example, if someone comes running up to you and said, "Did you see where the rabbit went?" And they're fed up with the rabbit eating their plants, and they've got a gun and they want to kill that rabbit. Now you may think, "Oh, I need to keep my ethics. My ethics says I must speak truthfully. I should not lie. And if I say nothing that is also misleading, or if I look the wrong way, it's misleading. So I do need to give some response, and I know where the rabbit went. So should I be honest?" There, of course, if one is honest, it may well result in the rabbit being killed and this person creating strong negative karma. So there, one actually abandons the greater, that of ethics, for the lesser, that of generosity, and will thereby lie to the person, send them in the wrong direction, and do so with confidence, sending them in the wrong direction so as to protect the rabbit, and thereby give it or practice the generosity of fearlessness. So here, because of the circumstance, one uses one's intelligence and abandons the greater for the sake of the lesser.
어디나신 안드네 망고우로와 베네아지 셈제로 냐로 스웨시 샤네 샤네리아 시메다 키리에 짐바땅에 세베나 제다 짐바따야 시키 냐다 데네게 심바땅에 본주 짐바 차이로와 제다다 짐바땅게스네 냐 소야 되다 짐바땅이데 담바이네다 데네게 따에 유치 데네게 괜삼치레와이나 제 짐바따야 지다 다에는 심지어 스웨시 심바땅 보야 다음에 짐바땅을 걸리 다비게 개월 제책으로 이나 직접 수고로 와다 다 마세바이네 데코소 마다베네 콜레스 칼라사야 제라 자고 말로 딩이 돈바이나 카르톰 그레라네 짐바따에 삼자시 심지어 스웨디 야스웨디 바 송고고레서 때디 개월 치고래 제다 치위되다라 디 콜리아 칼라 짐바 삼기되다라 셈체 소체 선에게 수림디 다교 말을 다교 말레스 니레다 곧 짐바따에 바샤지 곧 수림 곧 셈체 소체 송고레스 편치여 요레서.
And if one wanted to, for example, justify fishing, saying that, well, I have cats at home and they want to eat, and I'm going to catch their meal, that is not something acceptable, because whilst one will need to feed one's pet, one should not do so by taking life. So one should not justify the killing of, in this case, fish, for the sake of someone else as one's pet. This is not acceptable. One should refrain from killing, even if it means one cannot make that particular offering to one's cat.
안인자다 주의친의 체미동서의 개와 춘축이 된다라 개와 침보의 발로에 당겨 말에스 다 디슈리아 개와 침보의 된다 주게 된다라 개와 충아들 뒷바 남가 니가 뒤수치를 제고에 차량도 다 제디 제 충아들 발로 오래서 나디지 다 충의친의 체미동서
뒷선점비리도
안데 다용어서 가르스모스네 개와 춘축이 두키 춘축이 주게 된다라 개와 첨부들로 요 말에스 아샤교 말을라로와 디슈라 가르고 보르스네 개와 첨부 된다라 첨부 두개 된다라 개와 춘주디 발로에 나지기리에서 고고를 받아드나 벤데지 쉐바네 셈제 에네 셈제 소죄기 안에 베네 셈제 소소 준시에기 소야기 된다라 셈제 소죄 소야디 발로요 말에서 디 개와 체차르와 나던다라 디슈라 가르고 보르스네 소식이 준수에 디페니 심지어 소주에 소유하게 된다로 소수 주인디 바마 숨바던 디그리에서 가지고 보러와.
So concluding the third line, the greater should not be discarded for the lesser. So we've heard two different accounts. And I just want to emphasize this so it's clear to you that the onus is on us as individuals to think clearly and make the right decision based on our Dharma knowledge. So if there's an opportunity to be a part of something truly great and meritorious, but it means that temporarily one cannot help in smaller ways, then one puts aside those the smaller opportunities to be part of this great meritorious event. But so that's what the text says explicitly. But there are also times when one puts actually does the lesser and puts aside the greater. So the example of one will practice generosity or fearlessness, and generosity is a lesser practice in ethics, rather than being honest and therefore condemning one being to being killed and the other to creating strong negative karma. So we should take this more broadly than is said, and it comes down to thinking clearly for yourself based on your Dharma knowledge.
and so that said the budget robot to do to that so say that Sisavene say that Shan Jevin Domin, Pasha Teores or that Pasha the daughter was Rangi Pasha good Gechava Shen did that. Can you see me Yamlady round that Shen in Shen to show or Shen Leopard to your Deneza, Shen you to my side, Shen Yi, Negati to Yadi, Cheshire Yamlady is that round the Shen in Yamdo. The Kevana, usually Kevana, the deed carried them all in it, Shendy to say, Shendy and some Shores, to say Shen you to them or Shen you and some Shores.
The verse concludes with, but the most important consideration is the good of others. So the good of others, or more commonly translated as the welfare of others. Between the two, what is good for oneself and what is good for others, it's very clear from the perspective of the Bodhisattva. What's good for others is given far greater priority. So this, through the teachings you've had, it should be very clear. But this one needs to train one's mind well in, because when situations are comfortable, it's very easy to prioritize others. But when circumstances are quite desperate, it becomes much harder. So for example, if one is impoverished and really hungry, and one has attained a bit of food, those around you are also hungry, but you've got just enough for one, and you are desperate hunger. The temptation is very clear to eat it all yourself, and one will find many ways to justify that. But here, perhaps, what would be best is still to share the little that one has. But what this really comes down to is for the Bodhisattva. The training is very much focused on what is good for others, and by fulfilling the needs of others, the Bodhisattva happens to fulfill their own needs too.
Tiza Rangi Dun Samedi, Karijan Liwasa, Rangi Sing Assembly to Liwa, so Rangchepa Zendanga Wood, Tibi Randa Shen in the Rangzo Cheje, Samedi, Rangi to the Livora. That Jason Bandam Yamjel, Rangi in some of the Gao, that bit, that Yomobole do should see what that Yomobole ranches in some of the Duaris, and you simply the Tabachim Bichenium ranches in the Kuin show the ditches are. Is that ranches in the urban sending Yachimutu to go Marwa? Tis that San you go on Tovala, Chan you sim Yamlet, Jamni and Yamnajo, to the Jamni Shenches in some door. Shenle Pando to Yachidas Tigor. Dinner that Shenches in Sadi, Geshe Thubten Rabten, and Delan danger to go. That is other. Rangi dona shede ranching to the Yungore, Shen you don't do it, Shen Chevas, Shen, Jelly to share Yapu, recipe some bad or digger. In his other, rather than Shen you need to play to touch, Shen you to go to Ores, you see many men to Snangore said, the Sungur Chisadam, Nangazi, and then get rather Shen you to Nina, Shen and Toria, Gang to do to be the shed. I didn't get some time in that good to Shin, Chandor go right.
But staying with the fourth line, but the most important consideration is the good of others. For the Bodhisattva, what will stand out for them here is that this is a line about the need to abandon grasping at themselves as dear, or the self-cherishing mind. Because for the Bodhisattva, grasping at themselves as dear, or the self-cherishing mind, this is their main object of abandonment. For them, acting in their own self-interest is an even greater enemy than their afflictions. What they are focused on in terms of their object of abandonment, what they are focused on abandoning is a self-centered attitude, an attitude of placing their needs ahead of others. This, for the Bodhisattva, is the most repugnant of minds, the mind that has to be constantly guarded against and abandoned at every opportunity. They have even more, the Bodhisattva is on even greater vigilant looking out for this self-cherishing mind than the afflictions. So for the Bodhisattva, this is a great focus for them. So for us, we certainly need to remain focused on the afflictions. That being said, though, to build up habituation, to identify the self-cherishing mind, and to start to separate ourselves from it, this would be good to do. So the three types of ethics, by verse 58, we have concluded verses 34 to 58 were the ethics of refraining from misdeeds. And now verses 59 to 83 were the ethics of accumulating virtuous qualities. So that is now concluded. So now we come to the third type of ethics of a bodhisattva, ethically striving to benefit sentient beings, from here to verse 97. And that brings us to the 84th verse. Having understood this, remain constant and diligent in striving for the good of others. Those with compassion and who are far-sighted are permitted that which is otherwise prohibited. Having understood this, so the way it's translated is softer than it needs to be. Firstly, it relates to the first two types of ethics, because now we're starting at the third type. So the having understood, not just understood, but become greatly proficient, skilled, highly knowledgeable, but not just intellectual knowledge, but also skilled in one's application of abandoning or the ethics of refraining from misdeeds and the ethics of training in virtuous qualities. So being highly knowledgeable and skilled in both of those trainings. So that's the meaning of having understood this. Remain constant and diligent in striving for the good of others. This is precisely how bodhisattvas train. So the second line, it furthers across both lines. So this remain constant and diligent in striving for the good of others. This is how bodhisattvas train. Their minds are always focused on achieving the good of others, and they do so through their trainings, through the qualities they have developed within themselves. And this is something they are constant and diligent about.
Shantideva Gachimbo Chede Chik Gashelia or the Tom Dao Yungurua de Deji Nashi Deji Shuba Nashi Semji Shen Sokyo Yalia Zushiwa Yungurua Zushiwa Shaswa Deji but the Deji Pesha Matejera Semja Sokyo at the Zusha Nikardam Gorsen Semja Sokyo Tunshe Semja Sokyo at the Sungures Nazuki City Dinajida Shandin Gachimbo drew the Shari Pemba Gachimbo drew and Denegi that my Jeba na gaiwi lega Mongolia sigri esore. They on sigri wa dene ona karjigri ese de duwaros. Da duwango so ma de dene ona chik ko dobaru chaguru wa. Edi dango so yo ma de now doing it ili wa de.
Now, as we move to the third and fourth line, the scenario that is presented, so not explicitly, but what is being addressed here is that when bodhisattvas are focused on achieving the good of others, on helping others, and others refers to absolutely everyone, no matter who they are. And some beings are in a particularly desperate situation. And in this context, what I mean by someone being in a desperate situation is their minds are deeply afflicted. Their perception of what is acceptable and not acceptable is deeply distorted. So when the bodhisattva reaches out to try and be of benefit to such people, they will find themselves in quite challenging circumstances where it's not explicitly clear what the correct path of action is. And the bodhisattva may well find themselves presented with an array of bad choices. And this is because when the bodhisattva reaches out to help people deeply afflicted who are not at all ethical, they may well be put in difficult positions and need to make some difficult choices.
How it is it? Madame said, I think Chikilega Mativache come to capture Timgan Juwa and Timbungi Nigal Chikwisa Yomarwa, Chip Pamba Chik Toba Sugurwa. Jason Badagia, Denigi, Semje, Chik Ni Domino Kabla, Jason Balia, Semjan Hamjela Nirio Marwa, Semjan Hamjela, Zewani Chimboyarwa, Jenny Zewani Chambo Yubare. Semje nyering meba rede ina semje phajuni de chik mari bane chiklin chete da chiklu yongje chagro da ina ko dine ngura dine yo da anda ko chiklu yongje ne chigri be chik mari an si ko zeo yo mari bes an ko nyering chi do asembe samlo yongsi ba ro da dine yongru wa da samlo na dine korso ro an jeza dine yongru wa se de ta doba ro dine sidi go ro da.
So give an illustration. So imagine a bodhisattva has witnessed a crime. So the perpetrator has been arrested and is now appearing in court, and the bodhisattva has been asked to give evidence. And in dependence on the bodhisattva's evidence, the perpetrator will be sent to prison, will be punished. So the bodhisattva feels no different towards the perpetrator as towards the victim. The bodhisattva feels equal love and compassion for them. So the Bodhisattva is now in a position where, should they speak truthfully and say what this harmful action this one person did, that person will be punished independent on the Bodhisattva or what the Bodhisattva has to say. So this puts the Bodhisattva in quite a bind. The Bodhisattva doesn't want to cause harm to anyone.
Digi ring CBS in you can Maubana, Karakaru, Kewa Karuna, Yagari Karisin, Yao, Chasa Sanji, Kingo, Ejere, Tujanga, ring CBS, said.
So there I just presented the context in which now these two lines follow. Those with compassion and who are far-sighted. So this actually refers to the Buddha, can be interpreted in different ways. But here we should take it as to referring to the Buddha. So those with compassion, they said in Buddhas, who are far-sighted. Those with compassion are far-sighted, something like that. In that it refers to Buddhas are far-sighted in that they have the capacity to recognize the karmic consequences of what is done.
That Dicheba and the Mao Basanji Karakin was Charles never that Dicheba and the Mao, but the table did you Gracious Asanji Kangores or that is a Tujam of a rinsing base head. That go you church, do you then go you Muyu when you go to Jova, do you tarring book when I go to Jova, then you go you church Maluva Chasa and Sanji Kangores.
So for ourselves, we know how often we are plagued by doubt, by confusion. We see a variety of choices before us. We can, to the best of our ability, evaluate which is better, but often we don't really know. We think based on our knowledge and experience, oh, this will be best, but we do not really know. Buddhas, though, because they've completely purified and transformed their mind, they do really know. From whatever choice is made, they know what the distant outcomes are of what the choice that is being made, not just the immediate outcome, but the outcome to come later in life, later in lives to come.
Never Chichu Mares a guy la soba. And the Change Simba Solama, the Channel Luigi Chimba, down Chumares, a Change Sanji di Gabarwa, Denik, Tangas in the Chipinalagic Narzalia, jail, Society Tomason del Sosa Sola Papia, Sudim Sungures, they to him the Sola Papia, Sudim Sungur Mato, to him the Shaki Mars, Sanji that, to him Sungur di Chishomas, Gabarwa. Chesada, Sosa Givota, Yarada. So Changisima Soloma Cholamba Digi Dichi Mare Shibi Gashaba Digi and the Sanjigi God to control Gabare in a Changisima Papa Digila now a regular Genetics now a Tibetan or Cheda Gaba Namjantella Nam said Changisima Papa Namla Kura Dichi and Tigris and a now Nangor Hesh.
We can change the translation of the fourth line slightly. Those with compassion and who are far-sighted permit that which is otherwise prohibited. So the Buddhas teach very clearly what should be adopted and what should be abandoned. And for the vast majority of us, this is exactly what we should do. So for the hearers, the solitary realizers, ordinary bodhisattvas, those on the paths of accumulation and preparation, it is taught they need to practice or act ethically and stay within the restraints of what is ethical, even at the cost of your life. So in the same way as we guard our life, to that extent, we should guard our ethics. In the same way, we do not put our life in danger, we should not put our ethics in danger. So this is the very clear teachings that the Buddhas give to all ordinary beings like ourselves, hearers, solitary realizers, and ordinary bodhisattvas.
Tibetan cheve na tanga ju ina chi so sho cheve Diwali ro chun Diwali cheda jen se ba papa digela ni je samba yong sta ba do kon ju kan cheve ine shen simjen digi duya da shen le zhe zhe wa ni ji chen be wong ge shen simjen tam ju kwana pe be chi do ji ma do rang dong gi don da la bi ne ji ma ro ba yin sa jen se ba papa digela ni cheve ne Tibetan yong le nang na ma de sa st chen na ti go le sa de.
But Arya Bodhisattvas, for them it is prohibited to do what is permitted to do, what would otherwise be prohibited. So why is the situation different for Arya Bodhisattvas? Their motivation is always free of affliction. The afflictions do not appear in the mix of their motivation. So therefore, if they engage in something which by being done by anyone else would clearly be harmful, the motivation of the bodhisattva is untainted by affliction. And affliction here, we should understand in a complete context. There's no grasping of ignorance, so there's no grasping at true existence. There's no self-cherishing, one's own self-interest involved at all. Therefore, bodhisattvas Arya bodhisattvas can engage in what for others is clearly prohibited and should be prohibited, because they will not accrue any non-virtue from engaging in such behavior because of the quality of their mind.
Men yu mo yu xie xian ya na zi zha de men le pe bi da tu go lo ji ze ko du jie de ji yi sa ba na ne ga xie so xue ni ga yo de so zhe ni ga yo da ke ba de ge di be xie dan de ko su ge dan be xie dan de ko xian ye pe bi ge so gyo bie ge ne bi da tu go lo men du ti ji ze jian yu xian ba de ge nga zu yu le de sha de ge da nga zu le ge wen na di ha zu le di ba sa ya ge kyu che go lo di ba sa go xie le ni bi cha wa di ba sa de Chanyu Semba Digi, Chanyu Semba Papa Digi, Myomomba Digi, Dushene, Chike, Beje Danje, Shenle, Pepe Jawa Yashimu to a page down to go leisure. Chesa Dineza, Menda, the Digi Mengi, Guanashin, Chitu go leisure.
For example, if we were to eat poison, for sure, all of us would suffer, perhaps even die. But those who are skilled, who have both knowledge and then experience in utilizing that knowledge, can take that poison and utilize it in a way that brings better benefits, utilize it as a medicine. So similarly, for ourselves, afflictions only cause suffering. Afflictions, by their very nature, they taint the motivation and therefore lead to a negative or a mixed result. But for Arya Bodhisattvas, this is not the case. They can engage in actions which appear to be afflicted, but because of the quality of their mind, there is no affliction present in their motivation.
미나 동로사 닝시우게 제다코 심지미 나비어 세번에 코페 지코롱 동아바도 매번 녀와녀 동아바도 매번 녀와 샤세서 닝제다 닝제 선배 닝제 안데 마세 코 민압교서의 민압교의 소로제 닝제 선배게 단 민압교의 소교회게 소교회다 코롱 나송을 교회게 된다라 근데 전시세면 대부분 니심을 전시선바디기다 같이 도도나 미디 서버에서 그렇다 서버에서 디기다 제이스부터 서버디 가르치 서버에서는 그런 양아서를 말하기 양아서를 교비치도 니지군에 납다 그 양아서는 그 동아 빠면 반영 보레스 저는 닝제 디레데 코닝 뭐제 내용나 지금 선배 그 동아 다운도 된제 내용에서 이게 다운도 된제 그런 것은 동안요에 들어봐요. 안에 심전 시행 강사 현대의 민감계 때문에 소조변의 혼주의 시제, 혼주의 강아지, 뒤는 소교에 대해 소야. 제자 민감계 소교, 소를 교야 당 그런 나선의 교회에 니제 니신도 니제 계시, 니제 원계 안에 디 메디 서버에서 오래. 제자들 비서여도 다지는 전주 선바텔이야. 니제 하고 쉬우게와 인자 디기 소 쓰는包没把撒把来修了。제자들 디버 사이게 잡라 수는 봐도 매바 사바레서 제가 디네자 디 전시마 파바디기 다 지네자 곧 현팀 곧 미스세바디 현팀 바시 현팀 코네시도 라운드 다오기님의 현팀 코네시도 세바 인자 안데디 토바도 매바 사바레 제가 전시마 파바레 도시네 디버 사이 말에서 왔던 시빈 제가 디네자 가반남자 당한도는 도인의 소식이 원래 심제 랑게 심제 소취의 인지미지 딱 제초마르와 중국어와 제자대 가반남자 나와 인세의 전시스마 파발에 되는 능고를 했다. 안주 소소기보다 제초마르 가샤바디에 전시스마 파발에 상이기 그런 인지미지 제초마르서 가고 말에서 능고를 나와요.
So yeah, it's good to recount the well-known story of the Arya Bodhisattva, who was a trader, and he was one of 500 merchants on a ship. And with their clairvoyance, they were aware of the captain's devious plan to kill all 500 merchants, throw their bodies overboard, and claim all their goods. Recognizing this, the Arya Bodhisattva was faced a choice. They could either do nothing and save themselves, or they could intervene. But intervening would require them overpowering the captain, probably killing the captain. And if they were to do so, they may well suffer karmic consequences. But if they were not, then the captain would kill and undoubtedly would go to hell for an incredibly lengthy period of time and suffer greatly. That was sufficient to give motivation to the Arya Bodhisattva. It's not acceptable that I stand back and do nothing and let this being create the causes that will lead to their immense suffering. Moreover, the other 500 traders, they're all going to be killed. This is not acceptable. So a strong generation of compassion, this bodhisattva then overpowered and killed the captain, thereby saving the captain from himself and saving the other merchants. This was an act of killing, but because of the power of the compassion under which the Arya Bodhisattva acted, the negative karmic consequences were fleeting. For ourselves, though, it's a completely different situation. So we should not take from the story that, oh, this is an example that I can follow, that if I have a good motivation, I can do anything because I believe my motivation to be good. The reality is our motivation is not free of afflictions and not free of self-interest. Therefore, this is a story of what is possible for Arya Bodhisattvas as opposed to something that we can do. For ourselves, we should refrain from killing.
지상의 심지기 된 주변의 지사 되니기 다 미치고마서는 그 납게서도 오래 납게 민합게서 납게 대야 동안용어야다. 코로나에 안에 동아바도 매번 용어에 채워래. 그래서다 고스에샤베나 안에 코로나 디 안에 디 예의 동안용 먹어야 제 민합게 되어 소타야지. 디 담가를 와다. 디 담가 그렇게 왔습니다. 디 미치게 미치고 있어야 와다 서로 담가디 다치자다 대시 슈가 지바의 체위 체도 총화다나 지게 셋 체비 총의 추도 체 미직 소교야게 돈 디프사그레스 베섬전 미차장 앞에 수주베나 한 수주베나 다 퀄리티가 같이 코로니아와 보도면 연구에 책으로 제자 되네자 리스텐 대심지 된지에 봐라 안도시네다 된다게 체중 삼다도 시리도.
From the perspective of the Bodhisattva merchants, it was an easy choice. By them killing one, 500 were saved. Moreover, not only were 500 saved, but the captain did not create the causes to go to hell. So for them, it was an easy decision.
나는 나지면 야 심지에 심지에 된주다리야 근시워선 로버트 동당 권매당 对于内拉国家性 람바 섬도 사자데 최고 수마 도바지스.
Now we come to the 85th verse. For those who have fallen astray, with those who are unprotected, and with those abiding in yogic discipline and practice, share your food, eating only what is sufficient. Other than the 3 monastic robes, all should be given.
나디 안도 중단 나디디르와 게노 당저 잡중 나데니게 안데치게 참바로다 데니시 마 제송에서와 데니 나다 소소리아 로버 동당 권매당 세드다가 제일 소소리아 사야동야기 아리 예바디 안에 마 로버 동아스는 로버 동아 둔로르스고 로버 동아 둔로데 자다 키라 소바다 데소리아 한 소소게 사야디 혼들레 고시에 제오레시 고시에 제 로버 동다 원매다스는 데니게야 로버지게 매하는미 데니게 교 이네 컨저리아 안에 데소리아 고시에 제오레스 아 두주 내라 고 두주 내라 세드다 베닝아드다 두주 세드 참 냠네 제게 세오라 데네 냠네 제다 미 지게 다 남바 용거래 야메 치료 베네 아직 개위 냠네 제토야 되게 곰 냠네 제 용거로와 데소리아 안 소스게 사야드 유제티 사야드냐 되게 컨절레 고시야 제오레 해체 고시아신스도 로버 동당 권매다 두주 내라 고차신스 소스게 사야드냐 쉐베나 이 고시 캡체 샘제 누로레마 짐바땅 하는 고미베 캡미베 교워드시다 바 짐바땅 안디 디인도와다 제 소스게 냠네 시게 냠네 곰제 샨다 유베네 콘들레 곱시야 제요 제효서다 고시아신스.
The context of the verse is composed is for those who are ordained and those who are living in solitude. But that's a context with which we should read it. But it refers to how they should share their food, their requisites with others. So there are 3 categories. There are those who have fallen astray. So this refers to those who are suffering from the karmic consequences of their previous poor ethics. So those who have fallen into the animal realms. So here we'd imagine if one's living in solitude, there'll be wild animals, birds, and mammals around oneself, and one should share one's food with them. Also with those who are unprotected, so those who are impoverished, who are destitute, who do not have the protection of a family or a village, those who really are on their own, these too, one should share what one has with. And then the third group are those who are abiding in yogic discipline and practice, so one's fellow practitioners. If one's living in solitude, there may well be others around you in the general area who are also in solitude, whether Buddhist or non-Buddhist. One should share with them too.
That's also the disorder. That goes to the lama social science or disorder. Remember some of the Sajates. Chazada social yobadi said social yobadi that Tango controlia chopu. In a social society, the Mount Hagio Malaysia say Mount Hagio Majorjatava, the name Mount Havana, Georgia, New Goche, Yamni Chevale, Comnimjal, New Gores, Shazam Mount Hagio Malaysia. Then Yung Tavine, Yung Tavine, the Joto, Toyada, then you would go charge Yamnesia, never checked New Years, Pasichi, Jeza, remember some Sabor City, Jota, Jamba, Yung Matava, Mount Matava, Chetata Saburis, remember some Saja days.
And then in terms of oneself, share your food, eating only what is sufficient. So you should eat what is required, not overeating because that may make one's mind a bit dull, one's body heavy, tired, and don't eat too little, because then one may well end up weak. So rather eat what is sufficient.
Jizam and Raption Ganon Disolianima, Conche Shores, she's not that Conche Sungo, Jeoris Tunga, Chensan Sung, Sumaro Conche Shore. In a diati, Subokyo da, never that Tinigina, the Jimasavina, and Susuke, Subokyo, and Yaman Chele, no Yuta, Disolia Conche, Jemo and the Calas and the Tigres and now Young Dinege, that is Jesatus.
The Buddha prescribed that monks and nuns should not eat supper, should just eat breakfast and lunch. But he also prescribed that for those who either are ill or are physically not strong, then for them, they certainly should eat at night. So again, taking this path that is not going to either extreme of overindulgence or self-harm.
Chu sumo toba cheese. Chisada, Sosugi Dulo, Della, Sosugi Koyagi, the Chu sumsine, Tagu Lungu, Chick Chugus, Chugu, Tangu, Lagu, Chugu, sums. Di Chugu Sirua, then Tangu session up the Roa, and then Namjar. Disum Sura, Disum di Gorwada, Shenda Mendatigomaro Chumana, Chena, Sosuya, Disum Matopa. Shanda di lunga yuna ate opore simba tampore esa disum tiga ma sosu gore di sosu yemne jara di gogo iza di ma tigo ma esa chugu summa to ba chugu sosu chugu sumba tiga ma di sosu chugu lama yuna ba long de tigo esa then chisa dinigi kweru ama yune to still gore chuma sum chins.
The final line, other than the 3 monastic robes, all may be given. So we looked at food and our clothing. So the 3 monastic robes refer to the 2 yellow robes as well as the lower robe. So these should be retained, but everything else can be given. So, like we say in English, you giving the shirt off your own back, but at least keep yourself keep enough clothing for yourself. The rest can be given.
Tina Rabju Dinige ina that Jiget Yamna Jayantulia. Shenda Pinjo, New Roda, Sharia Marada, Chizada Shania, Hemba to Chimba Tangote, Susuga Sayat, may account your body, Susugi Yapoli, and that Semje and Da, and the one may be Jabda Tiniki, and Yamnichi and Shanda Solja to Shim, Susu can you but in it, Koshi kept Chimba down to Kosuga Chimba, Koshi Chimbi Yamnichi, and Susugi had Susulia Koi to Loro, Shevena, Susugi to Lamaru, Teva Yuvena, and just I go to Chimba town.
Living a life of simplicity, one will have just, in terms of requisites, food, clothing, and not much more. But even that, what one has, one should have keep for oneself just what one needs. There's no need for an abundance. Therefore, one should rather give to others, give to those who have fallen astray, so to animals, give to those who are in great need, the unprotected, the impoverished, and to give to support one's fellow practitioners. And one, again, living simply, one will just have food and clothing to give, and therefore give that.
먼저 나와야 길 가라 저도 거기 미야 되게 근데 나와 마기지 마다기를 되는 방법을 때문에 제가 제술이야 아니 가시게 칼라제 잡려 방치리게 난 다른 도시네 디고로 도시신 내다다 비고로다 되니게다 먼저게 랑치징에 삼로 셰 펜비 삼로지 마투디 안 되네게 노트쇼어와다 아주 심비 냠는도 전주소하데 제가 니네 통해도 소소이도 것이게 되고 했어. That one like Goshia, yes, Chazan can't you Goshia to stay what is from or what?
We don't have many stray dogs here, but in certainly some parts of the world there are plenty. And if they see you eating, they will watch. They'll watch your hand as it lifts from the plate and goes to your mouth and then heads back down to the plate. They will be watching your hand very closely. And here we see whether the person is dominated by the self-cherishing or the other cherishing mind. In particular, if you don't think of times of abundance like today, but of times not so long ago when people really just had enough to get by. There, the temptation when you don't have much is at a time like this is just some stray dog. When you fed yourself and your hand is going back down to your plate, to rather pick up a stone and threaten the dog to chase it away. That's a clear expression of the self-cherishing mind. Rather, even in those times where one does not have much to share, if anything, there's still to share with those in greater need. So how should we practice this text for Bodhisattvas, ordinary beings like ourselves? So do the good qualities that we all possess, recognize these, but also do not be complacent about them. Recognize just how much further all our good qualities can and should be developed, and thereby strive to continue to develop one's ethics, one's generosity, one's patience, and so forth, becoming an ever more patient person, ethical person, generous person. And in particular in terms of generosity, giving of ourselves, sharing of ourselves, certainly our abundance, but also in terms of our time, our energy, our friendship, giving of ourselves to others. what we have in the way of this remarkable text by Shantideva is a text that was composed by a mind that had deeply been absorbed in the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha trained for countless lifetimes, eventually attaining the state of perfection, and from this state of perfection was able to teach the unmistaken Dharma. And from these unmistaken teachings, so many beings have attained Buddhahood. So many beings have become Bodhisattvas and have progressed towards and attained Buddhahood, and others are still abiding in the world as Bodhisattvas now. And Shantideva was one of these great beings. Based on the teachings of the Buddha, gave rise to bodhicitta within himself, and wrote this lifestyle book for bodhisattvas, how they should live. So for us, as aspirants to the bodhisattva paths, we should take this text both as an explanation of how our role models live, and we should take it as an inspiration for us to emulate from right now. Because if we are to fulfill this heartfelt wish and join the ranks of bodhisattvas, we need to do the very best we can in terms of our limited capacity to emulate the examples of these remarkable beings. And the most direct way to do so is through the clear recognition that every being we have ever seen or thought of or heard sound we've heard just wants to be happy. No being wants to suffer in any way. The motivation behind all that they do is for happiness. And therefore, the spirit of the Bodhisattva commits to doing no harm, to not acting in a way that adds to the burden of suffering of others, not speaking in a way that adds to their burden of suffering, and even in our mind, not allowing our mind to be negative and to criticize and to complain about others. And if that is the limits that we can do, that is excellent. But all of us, we can do even more than that. We can not only commit to doing no harm, we can also commit to helping wherever we can. And certainly, through ethics and generosity and patience, we can commit to not only not doing harm, but being of benefit where we can. And the truth is, our capacity to be of benefit is pretty limited, as well as the reach that we have, the number of beings that we can reach. It is limited. But if we develop a good motivation, and then we act under that motivation as well as we can, then at the end of the day, when we come to the third part, that of dedication, and we dedicate this merit, we dedicate it so that all these beings today that I've interacted with, through this merit I've created with them, may I be able to later teach them and all beings how to cultivate the parts of the Bodhisattva within. And in this way, whilst we are still far from being Bodhisattvas ourselves, we are holding the aspiration to join them deep within us, and we're doing what we can to emulate them as best we can. So when we bring these three, the motivation, the performance, or the activity, and then the dedication together, then we are creating the causes that will eventually lead to this result, the result where we ourselves will eventually arise as bodhisattvas. Thank you. Then we can conclude there for this week. Thank you.